Hi, everyone. Welcome to the webinar today. My name is Rosalie Ganawan, and I'm the Education and Public Programs Manager at the Chinese Canadian Museum. I'm joining you all virtually today from the traditional territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, which is whose lands we at the Chinese Canadian Museum are honored to live, work, and play on, of course. So we're so excited to have Adrian Ma joining us today. Adrian was supposed to be giving this workshop in person, actually, but unfortunately, or fortunately, we are undergoing some renovations in our physical space at the CCM. And so we weren't able to provide or promise a space in which we could offer this workshop at the moment, but we do hope that we can bring him back in person in some future date. But one of the silver linings of that is that having this workshop offered virtually makes it much more accessible for people across the country to be joining. And I see that many people are located outside of Vancouver, which is amazing. So to introduce Adrian, he is an award-winning journalist, professor, author, and documentary producer. He is the author of How the Chinese Created Canada, published in 2010, and how I actually heard of Adrian was when he wrote an article last year for the Walrus about his visit to the Chinese Canadian Museum's former branch in Victoria. It's now passed on to the Victoria Chinatown Museum Society, but he wrote about exploring his family's history through the museum. So I'm going to be turning it over to Adrian in a moment. We'll be having people, we hope that this workshop is interactive, but for the presentation, I just ask that everyone stay muted to give the floor to Adrian, and I'll just be like muting people during that time, but please feel free to ask questions in the chat. And there'll be chances to ask live questions later on at the very end of this webinar. So Adrian, on to you.
Rosalie, thank you so much for that warm introduction. And listen, there are many, many ways to spend a Sunday. This is a real privilege for me to spend this Sunday with you, and I appreciate you for taking the time to do the same. This is really what I love to do. And once again, have just so much gratitude for you taking the time to spend it with me, and maybe something wonderful and amazing can come out of this. So I'm going to start a presentation, and I'll go full presentation mode. I have some interactive activities that we're going to do together, and we'll have some moments to get together as a group and reflect and maybe be really collaborative with this. A couple things right off the bat. I will not be offended at all if you need to dip for whatever reason. You know, you're all busy lives, and if you need to take a break, absolutely go for it. No questions asked. Feel free to leave your video camera on and see these lovely faces, but if you just want to chill and just have your picture up, that's totally fine too. I encourage you to make use of the chat. We can kind of collate some ideas, and Rosalie can kind of highlight things that come up. And I will be asking for volunteers to share any insights they might have throughout the presentation. But for now, if you just bear with me for a moment, I'm going to get this little presentation started. Okay, now, Rosalie, how's it looking?
One black box in the center.
Yeah. So someone just.
Now we have three.
All right, so that should disappear in a second. We're doing okay now?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, cool. Okay, so welcome to this workshop on this Sunday. Here's a breakdown of today's agenda. I believe it's also posted on the website. We're gonna keep this around 3 hours. But we'll start off with a bit of an introduction as to who am I and what I'm hoping to do with you today. Then we're gonna move into our first activity, which I really like. I use this with my students a lot. It's called story mapping. We're going to move on to another activity after that, where we're going to think about writing from a sensory perspective and how to really incorporate detail and really special descriptions and how to articulate feeling and sentiment. Then we're going to move on to our last activity today, which is going to be sharpening our interviewing skills, because when you want to incorporate other perspectives, reaching out to other people is important. And so today we'll get some practice connecting with each other and how that can sharpen our interview skills. And then just to tie things together, I have some ideas and resources I can give you to help you take your idea to the next level. All right. So let's start off with some introductions. Which is the reason why you're here, I'm guessing, spending again a Sunday with me, which I'm really honored to be doing with you, is you're interested in exploring the past, the present, and the future, right? If you're attending today's workshop, I'm guessing you're interested in your family history, and maybe you've already taken some steps to finding more about that. Maybe you've looked at genealogy, historical archives. The Chinese Canadian Museum is this incredible institution, and they have lots of resources that can help guide you. I've got a link here, and I'll share this presentation with you afterwards so you can have all the links and all the notes. So please relax, don't feel like you have to take a lot of notes. I've got them all for you here. But yeah, they have lots of wonderful resources which you can utilize to help find out more information about your family's journey, all the good stuff. But where do we go next? Where can we take some of this knowledge, and how do we express it in a way that we find compelling? Um, Well, this is the reason why I am here today. So I am a journalist, professor, broadcaster, author. I've been working in the news media industry for 2 decades, and some of the places I've reported and written for, including the CBC, the Walrus, the Toronto Star, the Literary Review of Canada, the Conversation, many other outlets. I have been telling stories for my whole adult life, and this is my professional career. I tell a lot of stories about people doing interesting things from all walks of life, about all sorts of connecting to all sorts of issues and themes and ideas. On a personal level, I was born and raised in Hamilton, Ontario, so Canadian-born Chinese. Both my parents were born and raised in Hong Kong. I have grandparents that are from Shanghai and Quzhou, and it's been really fascinating to kind of delve into their past and their histories. And I've had this really cool career, to be honest. Like I've been really privileged. My career has taken me around the world to report on different stories. I've reported in China. I reported in the UK. I teach. I do interesting research. As Rosalie mentioned, I wrote a book about Chinese Canadian history a few years ago. And these are all really wonderful opportunities that I've had. But I must say, in especially the last 5 years or so, I've really started digging into my own life for inspiration on things I could write about and tell stories about. Because we all carry multiple identities, at all times. Like I am a journalist, I am a teacher, but I was also someone's child. I am someone's brother. I'm a father to two beautiful children, a husband to an amazing wife. This picture on the right is taken, as Rosalie mentioned, at the CCM's old site in Victoria. When my father first immigrated to Canada, it was through Victoria. He attended school there as a teenager. And that was kind of the beginning of my family's Canadian journey. And to go there with my kids, it was a really special experience, especially with my parents still alive and being able to recapture, to kind of see through my father's eyes what his experiences had been. Just as a quick aside, one of the oldest restaurants in Victoria's Chinatown is Don Mi. And so my dad told me that when he was a teenager, he used to save up all the change he could find because once a month he could go to Don Mi and get a little bit of Chinese food and he wouldn't be so homesick. And so on that trip, I actually took my family to lunch at Don Mi. My dad stepped foot in that restaurant for the first time in 50 years, which was just an amazing opportunity to see. So I do have a very special connection to the Chinese Canadian Museum, and it goes even deeper than that. But like all good storytellers, I'm not going to tell you that deeper connection until the very end of this workshop. So I will circle back to it, and it's all going to make sense. But just to say, it's a especially poignant and proud honor for me to be doing this with the Chinese Canadian Museum today, and to work with you people today as well. So I owe a lot to the power of personal storytelling. I think we all do. I think we all have some connections that we didn't have before because of stories. Um, because stories is connection. You may have done a lot of research into your family, thought about your history. So you may have things like dates, names, locations, times. That's information, which is important. Information is important to learn, it's important to pass on. However, it's stories that help you uncover the meaning and significance in that information. Stories are what help provide that human connection, that emotional resonance, right? So I think a big part of what we're trying to do today is see the ways in which stories create these connections. How do we get there? How do we kind of build these connections through our storytelling? Um, Telling and sharing stories helps us so much. We get to learn from each other's experiences. Stories become the foundation of identities and can help build communities. And it's important because it also brings down our defenses a little bit and helps promote behavioral change. There's research coming out of universities like the University of Pennsylvania, which shows that when you are able to share stories about people, narrative stories about people, rather than information, that is actually what has the potential to change their minds on a variety of subjects, such as discrimination, such as racism, right? It's when you feel like you get to know people that aren't just statistics. That's when we can actually see this effect happen. Telling stories matters so much, and just on a personal level, on a human level. All right, I love this quote by Maya Angelou: "There is no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you." And what I think Maya is saying, at least to me, this is how I interpret it, is that um, there's a certain kind of pain that you feel when you feel like you're alone. Like you feel like you can't share something that's gone on in your life, that there's a story that you haven't been able to tell. And that's why expression, creative expression, this passion that we have to ideate and more importantly than that to share is so vital. On the flip side of that too, I think there's also if you look at it a different way, there's no greater joy than being able to share a story inside of you and see it connect with people, to see it resonate, to know that you're not alone in that experience, or that someone has learned something from you, or maybe changed your perspective because of something that you've been able to share. I've experienced that power myself, and it's an incredible feeling, and it really does motivate you and inspire you to kind of keep going, right? So yeah, let's consider that. There are so many ways to tell personal stories, and I think it can be kind of overwhelming at the start. Oh, like I've got so many ideas, so many moments, so many memories I could turn into a story. But where do you start, right? Like where do you begin? And I think one way to look at it is I'll just kind of briefly go over some different variations of personal storytelling. So a really popular form, obviously, personal essay or the memoir. So this kind of first person storytelling, it really invites deep reflections, but offering your audience or reader insight into your own experiences. So I've written, many short personal essays that have been published by different news outlets. They often focus on a particular experience and me trying to draw out, whatever my reflections on it are. Also, there are many book-length memoirs that are a collection of reflections. On the right-hand side, I would really encourage anyone to read Paper Shadows by Wei Sin Choi. To me, one of the most poignant and breathtaking memoirs certainly I've ever read. Really, really fantastic. And these reflections often connect to broader themes and ideas. So, oftentimes a story starts out as our own personal experience, but we very quickly find a way to connect it to the experiences of other people. Whether it's cultural identity, discrimination, immigration, or just family, right? These are things that kind of bond us. And I think the real joy of writing a personal essay can be finding those connections and that connective tissue between everything. So just as an aside here, well, you'll get this presentation. I've had links to examples I think are really stellar, and I encourage you all to look through them. I linked to my Walrus piece here, not to be too self-promoting, but I'm really proud of it. And there's so many other stories that you can look over in a moment. People meeting, feeling kind of like alone or different, and then finding that actually no, my experiences are reflected in these different ways. There's a particularly poignant essay by Austin Chor from Rice Paper just about remembering his pawpaw and the red envelopes that he would get, and kind of learning more about that significance. Another type of personal storytelling is the documentary. So this is especially effective when you have access to really good visual or audio material. It's a very compelling experience because few things resonate to us as much as the sound of the human voice or the picture of the human face. So if you have access to that, you can tell really engaging, moving stories. I actually at the CCM in Vancouver this past weekend or last weekend, I was able to watch a couple of really amazing documentaries, these short films that were playing, and they were fantastic. Oftentimes as well, you're able to incorporate this perspectives of other people through interviews. So bringing those voices in, if that's a story that makes sense to bring in other voices, then that's really great. I've linked to a couple examples here. One is a video documentary by a journalist named Jari Osborne. Jari wanted to tell the story of her own father, who was a World War II veteran, and the discrimination that he had gone through, and yet still wanted to put on the uniform and fight for Canada, even though he wasn't a citizen. I have a link to another piece by Julia Hune Brown. It's a radio piece, and it's a story of Julia's grandmother who was a Cantonese opera singer and was one of the few people that were able to immigrate to Canada from China during the Exclusion Act. And so it's this fascinating journey that she took. So these are great examples here that you can look through at some point. Highly encourage you to do that. And again, personal storytelling may not actually just be a nonfiction story. So there's a lot of personal storytelling that directly inspires really great fiction, right? So much of fiction is inspired by our direct experiences and events that we've lived through. So maybe your memories aren't going to be a documentary or a personal essay, but maybe it's a jumping off point to some kind of fictional story that with compelling characters and you're exploring some different ideas. Denison Avenue is by this great writer named Christina Wong, and it's about the gentrification of Toronto's East Chinatown and her experiences and feelings about kind of watching it through. But it's done through fictional characters and illustrations. It's fantastic. It was a Canada Reads finalist recently. I also have a link here to Vancouver Public Library, who has a really great curated list of Asian Canadian fiction. So yeah, when you have a moment, peruse this and you'll maybe find some really fantastic inspiration. I can guarantee you that for most of these authors and artists, their personal lives were inspirations for these works. There are also so many other approaches, and I'll just go through these really quickly. For people here who are really interested in photography, perhaps you thought about a photo essay, just the power of the single still shots, and just kind of writing along that. So, here's an example of a photo essay that could come together. This is about the Chinese community in Toronto. So, if you've got great photos and you're thinking of turning it into something, that's a form of storytelling. Oral histories, oral storytelling is a really important tradition in many different cultures. And sometimes just being able to capture people's stories, especially of the older generation, before they leave us forever, is such an important endeavor. So as an example here, the University of Calgary just has this massive digital collection of oral histories about the Chinese community in Alberta. So these are long interviews, just have them on record. And so maybe this is a project that you're interested in, collecting stories and oral histories from people in your community or your life. Moving on to, I think, more innovative approaches, there are, mixed reality projects that I'm seeing. This project is by a professor in Toronto. It incorporates recreating people's memories of Chinatown using AR and VR, right? So, what was their kind of memory, and how do we kind of create this sort of like virtual representation of it? Because a lot of these spaces are gone and never coming back. Finally, as another example, this is really interesting, but live journalism, or what's also called living magazines. I was actually a part of this last year. I took that Walrus piece that I had published and turned it into a live performance where I was one of the most intimidating experiences of my life, but I basically recreated it as like a one-man stage, performance, and did it in front of an audience of like 100 people. But it's about storytelling. It's about in-person, incorporating dramatic elements, but with real life storytelling based on real experiences. Listen, I'm just kind of going through all these examples because there really is no single best way to tell a story. To be honest, you may not quite know which direction to go in until you kind of do more research and start developing your ideas. And what I would say is the fact of the matter is many stories feature multiple approaches within any given story. It's ultimately to serve the story as much as possible. But these are all different mediums, all different forms. What they do have in common, though, is that these are all ideas that are based in your personal experiences, right? So this is the kind of crux of my goal today. So everyone right now attending this workshop, you've got different aspirations, experiences, different skill levels when it comes to writing or production or what have you. Let's all start at the same level by identifying potential story ideas and finding a focus that we can develop, okay? So we're going to do this by engaging in 3 creative exercises that are going to build upon each other throughout the course of the day. So at the end of the workshop, I'll provide you some additional steps and resources if you're interested in developing an idea further. But the whole point is that at the end of this 3 hours, you're going to have at least a couple of ideas that you feel like you can maybe do something with, whether it's going to be maybe an essay, maybe a documentary, or maybe it's just something that you're going to do for yourself and maybe for your family, and maybe that's it. And that's totally cool. That's fantastic, right? Okay, a couple of things I want to talk about, and it's about taking care of yourself and of other people. So as part of this workshop, we're going to be engaging in some creative work, and that's going to involve exploring memory, personal history. This can be a very intense emotional experience. So I want you to know now, and I will remind you of this, you do not have to share or disclose anything you're not comfortable with. Really listen to yourself. Your privacy is really important here. If you find yourself getting a bit emotional, like thinking back on things, please take a break at any point, no questions asked. I like to present things informally, like there's no sense of formality or judgment here. We're just trying to be collaborative, to be creative, and I think a big part of that is listening to yourself and taking a break when you need it, or if you're fired up, just keep on going. The other piece of this is respecting each other. So during discussions and partnered activities, you're going to have the opportunity to share and receive stories from other participants, your kind of colleagues in this workshop today. And I'd like to operate in a spirit of openness. We want to foster creativity and we want to collaborate constructively. So please, 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 especially the nature of this sort of work, treat each other with the utmost consideration, respect for each other's privacy, respect for each other's boundaries, and engaging in respectful dialogue, because we're all coming from different walks of life. We've had different experiences. We've got different opinions about many a great thing. Please listen a lot and give respectful give respectful feedback and dialogue. All right, cool. So it all starts here, though, right? What's your story? What is your story? Well, the truth is, you probably got many stories in your bones, in your blood, in your heart, in your memory. We've got countless memories, experiences, histories that make up our own individual journeys. How do we figure out where to start? Here's what I like to do to start off, kick things off with this activity. It's called story mapping. It's going to take about 20 minutes. I think creating a story map can just give you a starting point or a couple of starting points to work with. So here's what we're going to do. You're going to create a personalized map that identifies key life events in your journey. You can use any medium you want. So if you just want to like open a new Google document, a Word document, if you want to crack out a notepad, if you want to get some pencil crayons and construction paper, go for it, right? Like this is whatever form you want to do this in. You just need something to be able to jot down your ideas. Then you're going to reflect on 5 to 7 pivotal life experiences that significantly shaped who you are right now. And these can be whatever you interpret them as, but they could be, a major family event, a family revelation, a cultural milestone, a personal triumph or obstacle. And this doesn't have to be connected to, Chinese Canadian identity or history or anything like that. It's just whatever you feel has been a defining moment for you. Okay. a moment of self-discovery, a moment of whatever strikes you as being, I am this person because of this moment or one of these moments. Now, we're going to plot the moments. Okay, so write them down. Try and organize them loosely, whether it's chronologically or maybe in terms of like priority. Just try and find a way to kind of just get these down onto paper. So maybe you got the one, two, three, four, five things. It doesn't have to be in any permanent order. Okay. But the next part is really the most important part, which is to add some details. So for each moment, if you could jot down just a few important details, this will help you remember why these events matter to you. And so once you have that, so maybe it's like, who else was involved? Where was I? How did it make me feel? Like, why do I consider this a significant moment? And just be very brief with it. Just, a couple of bullet points for these things. Finally, we're going to spend a little bit of time reflecting on these moments that we've picked out. And then I want you to choose one that you think you could kind of develop further. And maybe this becomes the seed of a story that you want to tell people. Okay. So I'm just going to exit for a second here. Okay. I'll put that slide back up, but how does that sound to everybody? Are you willing to try this with me for the next 20 minutes? Yeah? Okay, great. So why don't you come back at around 1:52? I will leave this snapshot up of the instructions. And no pressure. If you can't think of five, like give me, three, whatever it is, whatever's flowing into your mind right now. But I think the key thing here, try to be, honest, try to be open and just really think about what has been significant to me. Just give it a shot. And we'll reconvene and we'll just have a little bit of a chat about it, okay? So once again, I will put up this slide. When you come back around, just a little bit after 1:50, please. Okay, we've got a few minutes, and so I'd like to just get a little bit of reflection started, a bit of conversation. Listen, again, no pressure at all. Like it's whatever was kind of coming to your mind. And here's the really cool thing about this exercise. You could do it again next week, and you may come up with a different set of responses. It's whatever you're feeling in this moment, right? And then having it down on the page makes this incredible sort of difference, right? So I'm wondering if right now anyone would be maybe comfortable sharing a little bit about maybe what surprised them about the exercise. Did anything pop out to them that was particularly interesting, maybe unexpected, or have they noticed a certain kind of theme emerging? If you're interested in commenting, please put up your hand and then we'll get to you. And it's just whatever insight creatively you might share with the group. Anyone at all? Haley, yeah, go ahead.
Hey, so this is a really interesting activity, and I found that when I started to map things out, events or kind of negative experiences that kind of I thought weighed on me heavily, I didn't draw from them to be a part of my pivotal experience. And I kind of started to realize like maybe this was like an important step in realizing that my experience and what made me who I am doesn't have to come from negative, but can also be shaped more by positive as well.
Wow. Thank you so much. What an interesting insight. That's really interesting. Yeah, because I find so much like the negative stuff in my life with the memories, it often provokes like a kind of physical reaction in me. But when I really think about like the narrative of my life, so much more of it is the good stuff that I've been privileged to experience, right? And so that's just certainly my perspective. But Haley, thank you for sharing that. Anybody else? Anything just kind of come up that you found interesting from doing that exercise? Were you surprised like which ones maybe stood out to you or?
Um, I don't know how to put up my hand,
Oh, it's
Adrian.
okay. Regina, go ahead. Just go for it. Just go for it.
Yep. For me, I don't see it as a negative. Um, for me, those were the ones that actually made me who I am today.
Mm,
And they were pivotal because it caused me to go away from the mainstream.
Hmm.
And it was because of that that I had redefined my path of who I am instead of what I should be.
Yeah.
And so those were I'm like, they always ask you, would you do it again, or would you choose the
Hmm.
same path?
Hmm.
And I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't fall into those crack codes. I
Yes.
don't.
Yes.
So I wouldn't exchange it because yeah, I embrace it all.
Thank you so much for that. That's a really wonderful sentiment, which I do share with you in a sense. We all worry about, oh, like which path do we take? There's so many options, or am I going to make the wrong decision? And I find myself kind of coming back to time and time again. Well, really, there's only one path you can kind of take, and that's whatever path you take to move forward. And in a sense, that's the one that you live with. Can I just mention your comment in the chat? You said making a huge difference plotting it visually, then keeping it all in the head. Yeah, thank you for saying that. And I think that reminds me of like why exercises like these can be really helpful. It's because if you're not in the habit of putting things down onto a page or to paper, then it all just kind of floats around, in that brain. And so actually taking the time to just occasionally write down these things, whatever it is. Never put pressure on yourself that I have to produce a certain thing. But it's almost just like taking stock of yourself, checking in with yourself. And if, let's say, just once a week, once in a while, you just kind of write down whatever is kind of happening in your life. You reflect on these moments, and it gives you this kind of interesting clarity. And whether or not you use it for storytelling is one thing, but it kind of helps you, I think, thinking of your own life as a story can help you sort of understand some of the things better. And then when you look at things visually, it's definitely. Oh, Tim has a great comment here. The visualization made me realize it's like a network, and some things are associated. Tin. Would you care to elaborate further on that comments?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, I put down like a few of the major events in my life,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
when this come out, it has been a race of thoughts, I would say,
Yeah.
and I really echo with the thing that if I don't put it down, usually my racing of thoughts just keep on racing.
Sure.
But by putting it down and like seeing how the words are similar, or maybe the terms I use, and maybe
Yeah.
how things are actually closely associated, and
Yes.
that association made me realize that maybe one event
Yeah.
uh, uh, created different parts of me. And
Yeah.
as one single person, what I
Yes.
can only do is that I integrate it to my life at this moment.
That's such an excellent point. And then so much of storytelling is, it's these stories exist within us, but they don't get expressed until we're able to make the connections between these seemingly, maybe disparate things that have happened to us, but they all add up into who we are as people. I want to end off on one thing, and thank you so much for these comments and for these ideas. I find a lot of inspiration from them. I mentioned that I wanted you to reflect on your map, however it looks like, as a whole, and think about any recurring themes, patterns, anything at all that you kind of see within the moments that you've picked. So maybe if you're comfortable with it, having a quick look, can you maybe share like one or two words in the chat that you think really sort of you're seeing these themes like between the moments that you've picked out kind of recur again and again. Like this is really a part of the top of your mind, and really like kind of what you want to say, the story you want to tell maybe is connected to this theme. It could be family, it could be resilience, something like that. You do tell me. You tell me. Is there any theme that you're starting to see in your story map? You can just add it to the chat. One word, if one or two words, if you have thought about it. Wow. Wow. Thank you. Yep. Arrival. Like that. Great. Oh, nice. Yep. Yep. Hmm. Moving forward, I love that. That's great. Yeah, travel, Elaine. Yeah, travel is such a metaphor, right? For all these things. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Connection, isolation. Especially, I feel, COVID, post-COVID, still elements of that there. Yeah. Okay. Right? Okay, we're starting to get narrative energy, right? We're starting to get a bit of focus. Things are coming into to focus now, right? When we come back, we're going to take another step into that. Right now, you've been working really hard. Let's take a 10-minute break just to refresh your teas or coffees, whatever you need to do. Keep the chat going if you're in it, but let's take 10 minutes now. We'll reconvene, and then we're going to move on to our next activity, which is going to be how do you surface the details now? How do we take this narrative to the next level? Okay, so Rosalie will be back in 10, right? Okay, welcome back, my friends. We're going to move on to our second module now, and let me just get things organized. Okay. This part of the workshop I am really, really excited about because as a journalist, as a professional writer, this is where I feel there's so much joy and interest in the work here. And that's digging for detail. So as I mentioned previously, you may have done some research into your family life, into your community, and because you're going to need all those details, right? You're going to need to tell your story. You're going to need to do, background research on often the 5 W's: the who, what, where, when, why. Right? You've got maybe dates, names, locations, maybe historical context, maybe a couple of anecdotes. All of this is very important information, right? It tells you how you got to where you are now, where you might be possibly going, all that sort of stuff, right? However, when you're storytelling, you're not just sharing information, okay? You're trying to weave a narrative. You're engaging with emotion. And how you engage with emotion, how you make things emotionally resonant with people is by painting pictures with words. And we do this by collecting detail, right? So information is broad, details are specific, and specific detail is the lifeblood of really exciting, really engaging storytelling. Specific detail. I'll just give you a quick example. This is based on my own personal experience. But ever since I was a kid, every April, I visited the cemetery that my grandparents are buried at as part of the Qingming festival. So I know that during Qingming, Chinese families pay respects to their ancestors by cleaning their grave sites and making ritual offerings of food, paper money, and burning incense. I'm sure many of us here have participated in such ritual. This is good information. If I were to write this down and share it with somebody, they would find it, okay, yeah, thank you for sharing this with me. It's some insight into this cultural ritual that you do, okay? This is full of information though. However, if I just add some specific detail into it, it just takes it to a whole different place. So this is when I add detail. Every April, I visit my grandparents' grave as part of the Qingming festival. And every April, the ground is cold and muddy, still not having completely thawed from winter. The wind whips against my face as I try to light my bundle of incense sticks. I understand the importance of this tradition to show respect to my ancestors, but I hate the way the smell of the smoke clings to my clothes and hair afterwards. This is a very honest and true account. The other had information, had the who, what, where, when, all that sort of stuff, but this has what I kind of really feel about it. This has the emotional context. This has specific detail about how I'm feeling, what's happening in the scene. If I'm talking about the ground being cold and muddy, maybe you even feel it yourself. Oh yeah, like, I know what it's like to walk on a cold, muddy ground. And this is all true. Every April, it's still bloody cold out here, and every April, I'm trying to light incense sticks with the wind blowing and whipping everything around me. If you just add in just a little bit of specific detail, it just really does lift up your storytelling. Now, how do you get this detail? It's all about engaging the 5 senses with your writing. Okay, sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. Okay, so when you think about these moments that you've experienced, when you're thinking about writing a scene, when you're thinking about telling people a story, how can you tell the story while being able to pass on some of the emotional detail through the 5 senses? So number 1 is sight. Who or what was in the scene. There are things you can describe: people, objects, landscape, the colors of the place. What did the space around you look like? Yeah, were there specific colors, shapes, movements that you saw? What did you see? What did you hear? What sounds were present? Were they loud, soft? Could you hear people speaking? What language were they speaking? Was there an urgency in their voice? Were they were they laughing? What was the sound there? What was the music? Was it wind? Was it the hum of traffic? What was the tone? What was the mood? Okay, take us to that place. Build that picture. We're continuing to build this picture now with smell. Was there a particular scent in the air? I talk about the smell of incense sticks. It's a very visceral thing that I think about. But more so like when it gets stuck in your hair, and that really, really resonates with me. Did anything remind you of anything to evoke a certain feeling? How did the smell impact your experience of the moment? Remember the first time you had cao dao fu, in a street market? Oh, the smell. Maybe you loved it. Who knows? Taste. Oh man, food. As Asian Canadians, we love food, right? So if you're eating or drinking, what was the flavor? What was the texture? And did these tastes trigger a specific emotion, a specific feeling? How did it make you feel? Comforted, surprised, uneasy? Tell us what the taste was. Touch, very, very important. But what were you physically feeling at that moment? So you can always talk about the inner monologue, what we're kind of thinking of it, but tell us what you're feeling. Was it the warmth of sunlight? Was it a cool breeze? The texture of fabric or the ground underfoot? Were you holding something in your hands? A red envelope that someone got from their grandmother, right? And how did your body feel? Were you tense, relaxed, cold, warm? Not all of this detail might make it into your story, but we want to engage all the five senses because you may never know what sensory experience will really help you kind of connect your story with other people or just yourself, right? To really get that detail, that emotion, that relatability into it. I'll go back to the slide in a bit. I'm just going to introduce the activity here. Digging for detail. So here is the next activity, and we're going to spend 25 minutes on this, just writing, give you a little bit longer time. I want you to take one of the memories or milestones you wrote down in your story map from earlier, just one of them, whichever one sort of speaks to you right now, right? There's no right answer or wrong answer. It's just whatever one that's kind of like grabbing you right now and saying, I want to explore this a bit more. And I'd like you to spend the next 25 minutes writing this as a narrative scene. So there's a moment in your life. I want you to take us there as an audience. What were you experiencing? And really focus in on bringing in as much sensory detail as possible. So what were you seeing? What were you hearing? What were you smelling? What were you touching? What were you tasting, right? All those details that lead to this emotional connection that one can develop with the writing. I'm going to give I'm going to say a couple more things, and then we're going to do a quick check-in here. Before we dive into your memories, this can often be a really intense exercise. It can be an intense experience to go back into your mind and replay some of these memories because not all of them are really positive. And I totally understand that. So it's really helpful to maybe put yourself in a bit of a state of calm and relaxation before you really start diving in there and trying to surface these details. So one thing that writers can do is a bit of a body scan meditation. Sometimes these last a long time. You can also just do it in a couple minutes, just to kind of prime your mind, and more than that, to get to remember what it's like to focus on sensation in your body. Okay, so if it's okay with you, I'm just going to walk you through really quickly, just a couple minutes, but we're just going to prime ourselves right now to be open to accessing these memories and to try and really engage all five senses in the recall of some of these details so we can add color and life into our writing. So the first thing I'm going to have you do is just close your eyes. Just close your eyes, and we're going to take a few deep, slow breaths. Breathe comfortably, breathe deeply, okay, and just relax a bit. Feel your body relax. And now we're going to start with the body scan part. Okay, so we're going to start at the top of our heads. And I want you just to sit at the top of your head and just focus on whatever sensation it is you're feeling at the top of your head. And imagine your scan is moving down now to your nose, right, to your mouth, and just sort of focus on that sensation. What is your tongue doing right now? Right? What is the air in your nose? How's it feeling coming in? Get in tune with your body. Okay, keep breathing and keep going. Your arms, your fingertips. Right? What are your fingers feeling? Take your time. If at any point this doesn't feel comfortable, you can stop. Okay? But take this scan, if you're still with me, all the way down to your toes. You feel the ground that they're touching. Give them a bit of a wiggle. All right. Now let's talk about this memory that you have. Okay, let's bring that out. Let me pause for a second here. Okay. All right, so whoever's with me right now, we're going to take the next 25 minutes and we're going to do this writing exercise. And again, try to engage the senses, right? Think about this memory or moment that you've picked out and try to take us there, as a reader and use all 5 senses to do so. If at any point it gets a little uncomfortable or a little intense, feel free to just take a break. And don't feel any pressure as to what you write. The whole point is just to let the flow go, and whatever you come up with is whatever you come up with, okay? I'll put the slide back up, and yeah, just it's kind of playtime right now, okay? So whatever you're able to jot down, really use the paint from the senses. So Rosalie, 25 minutes from now, what would that be?
That will be at 11:50.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll open up a couple of breakout rooms in case
Please
someone
do.
wants to go into those.
Yeah? Great. Thumbs up. Excellent. Okay, cool. Looks like people are back in the room. All right, so I'd like to spend a bit of time just inviting people, again, just like we did with our last reflection. But yeah, did anything kind of surprising, unexpected, interesting happen with this exercise when we're starting to think about our memories in terms of the 5 senses? And maybe anything strike you as to kind of what you latched onto or what kind of triggered a memory for you? Feel free to put your hand up, and I'd love to know more. Manmeet, yeah, go ahead, please.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Doing it was quite, I'm going to say, therapeutic.
Oh.
It was kind of nice to get it out. Like I wrote down, what I wrote down was basically me not getting into, like trying to do a test to try to get into a college program.
Oh,
And
right.
me not getting into it, like describing each feeling, each touch, each sight, everything. Try to break it down into easy words. Just I wrote really fast than I expected. It was gonna still struggle, but it was still good. But yeah, it was quite good to get it all out on paper and understand that experience again.
I mean,
And
thank you for sharing. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off.
it's okay. It's okay. And understanding that feeling of going through it without again, like not dealing with it too badly and harshly during the moment, just like retrospectively and all that. And yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that, and for also talking about what sounds like a bit of a vulnerable moment for you. You know, like it was a disappointment, and yeah, it's thank you for saying that. Writing is therapeutic, and again, I'm not a medical professional. I'm a writer, but from my own personal experience, this is part of that human connection and human communication that we so crave. Is that story that's inside of us that has nowhere to go. It feels really good to be able to, even if it's just for our own edification, put something on the page and just to kind of know that we have lived through this, and maybe in years from now we remember things differently, and we have a different sense of closure with certain things. I'm reading Regina's comment. The breathing exercise really helped to calm the body down and connect me back to the memories deep seated in my body. Surprised how much the body remembers. Regina, thank you so much for that comment. Would you care to like tell a little bit more about that experience? What surprised you? Okay. Um,
Oh, yeah, okay, I'm on. Sorry.
oh, no, no,
A
no
little,
problem. No, no.
a little
Yeah,
bit of a techie moment.
sure.
Um, yeah, no, it's because okay, I'm not revealing my age, but it's been a while, and I just so much has happened in my life,
Mm-hmm.
mom as well, and so I didn't think like this I could remember all this, and then you did us through this calming exercise, and wow, I was surprised I could go deep back to when I was a teenager going through, my A level results, and even the visual memory and also the sound and how it felt in my body. I remember all of that. So it's like, wow, it surprised me. But I have always read that, your body doesn't forget, and takes on all the stress, and it still doesn't forget unless you kind of connect and let it go. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
No, it's my pleasure. Thank you for doing this with us, and for taking that. And it's a very it can be a very intimidating thing to reconnect with some emotions that we know, whether joyful or sad, right? They're big feelings, and but you're absolutely right. Like your body has memory, and you can tap into that. But I do find like being in a relaxed state, feeling like you're in a safe place, has a huge difference with that. So as a writer, as a storyteller, put yourself in a good position, right? Do it somewhere you feel safe, where you feel you can relax a little bit, and know that these feelings can be big and overwhelming at times, and you can pause and take a step back and breathe while you're doing this. But I find, yeah, it's incredible how just thinking about things from a sensory perspective, as opposed to, oh, well, I did this and then I did this and then I did this. Well, no, if you listen to your body, like the story just kind of becomes a lot more richer, and you're not going to use every bit of sensory detail that you pull out, but you may think, oh, like for some reason, like it's like the sound of this thing really brings me back to this place, and that's going to be a prominent piece of my storytelling. um Anyone else, just anything at all, like any kind of insight that they had while they were writing? Has this made them see their writing in a different perspective, or made you think, this is useful for me, like in terms of the story that I want to tell? Anybody know? Dorothy, please. Dorothy, then Peggy. Thank you.
Okay, I'm unmuted now. I thought this was really good, and I was just going through that particular moment, and I really liked kind of being in the place and seeing things. So I remember this clock. I was looking at the clock constantly, and I kind of described it, and but I kind of I wonder if you have any suggestions. I kind of go down the rabbit hole of like too many details. I'm just kind of curious about if any sort of recommendations or tips, like not like describing everything, or is it just things that you just kind of remember that's important? That was just one thing, because I can
Oh,
just
okay.
remember
Sure.
touching the door and just the
Absolutely.
quality of the door and hearing, the TV in the background. Back those days,
Mhm.
this was like a childhood memory, like listening to, after school specials, that sort of thing. So I don't know if you have any tips
Yeah,
about where to
absolutely.
stop.
Here's my advice with that, and that's a great question. I would say don't let the words just flow. Don't think about what this is going to look like in 5 weeks or 5 months, right? In that moment, try to just go back as much as possible and write down these details, and then like a day later, a week later, you go back to the words and you start picking things out. If you notice a certain pattern or recurring theme, or just like a really beautiful anecdote or a thing that you really gravitate towards, then the other things can kind of fall away. But my advice to you is not to restrict yourself in your emotion and your memory recall, because I think you'll never quite know what is that single detail that really like kind of to you encapsulates the story. So I would say don't rush that process at all. Write freely, write openly. Don't put any pressure on yourself that there's too much, because honestly, you never know what the gold is. So you have to do a lot of digging. Does that make sense?
Yes. Okay. Thank you. I'll
Yeah.
keep writing.
Give yourself permission to just feel and to just write without any feeling that this has to be something. Okay, Peggy.
Yeah, thanks for that, Adrian. That's so helpful. And yeah, I'm so grateful for this exercise you shared with us today because
I'm
it
glad. Thank you.
as a yeah, like as I was writing, so I was writing about this moment where I was told I got into a fellowship that was really important to me, but actually just going through the exercise through the five senses made me realize that the moment was actually another moment. Like what
Yeah.
really shaped me was a different defining moment that was related to that. But I would have never been able to get there if I wasn't thinking about, I was trying to like tune into like what it felt like in that moment and trying to take me back to the scene. So um and it's amazing how it could trigger like other memories for you that could be just as defining. So I just wanted to share that.
Thank you for sharing that. And you raised a really important and I think wonderful point about the creative process, right? There is no predetermined destination with the creative process. It is a car that you get into and you start driving and think you're going to see things, you're going to head to different places and be open to all of that, including thinking that you're headed down one road, but really you're going to veer to another one because that's where, the journey is going to take you. Um, Fantastic chat. Yeah, you know what? Let's just. Anyone have any one more comment? Just any insight at all? I'm really enjoying this. Cassandra, please go ahead.
So I was trying to write about something my father said, and I have very little clear recall. I was probably, well, it's more than 50 years ago now. And I kind of can remember where it was, but I don't remember very much else about it. Does that suggest maybe I should pick some other pivotal thing because it's not there?
That's an interesting question. And I'd say that there's no right answer here, Cassandra. There's the sense of maybe if there's not much you can extract from that moment. And we'll get to this maybe in the next section of our workshop, which is going to be interviewing. Are there other people that can kind of maybe fill in some of those gaps with their memories? Now, as we get, later into our lives, there are kind of fewer and fewer people that can kind of do that. I would also take this idea, though, that just because you perhaps lack detail about a certain event, it's actually interesting because then what you can also write about is the absence of that connection and detail. It's a very powerful thing to write about as well. So there's the abundance of like detail and feeling, but there's also when you feel like you're lacking something, you're missing something, you're yearning for something, that's very powerful stuff that you can also write about. What are you missing because you don't have this memory? There's a whole host of kind of things you can tap into with that. Does that make sense?
That's great. Thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. All right, let's take another 10-minute break because we got to cool down, relax a bit, and then we're going to move into our final module of the workshop. You're going to have an opportunity to connect to each other, and let's going to hone our ability to ask good questions and how to really get the most out of our responses. All right, so let's get back here at in 10 minutes time. Rosalie, so that would be what would that be in West Coast time?
12:13.
12:13. If you're on the East Coast, it's 3:03. 3:13. So we'll see you in 10 minutes, okay? All right. Last push. All right. Welcome back, my friends. Listen, we're at the home stretch. We got one more activity to do. I'm really excited to do this one. We started off by connecting with our memories. Then we moved on to connecting with our senses. And we're going to end off our day by connecting to each other a little bit more. I'm just going to get my presentation going, and we'll go right into our final module, which I'm very excited about, because this is kind of what I do for a living. And I really see the privilege and immense honor that I have, be able to talk to people and get their stories. So even though we're telling stories from our personal perspective, it often will involve the perspectives and voices of other people, because that's how life is, right? Life is connected, right? And interviewing is a great way to get valuable insights and details. Again, if you're trying to fill in gaps, if you're trying to open up the conversation to include different perspectives. But there are techniques and approaches we can use to vastly improve our interviewing skills. And these are skills that I teach at journalism school in Toronto. There's a lot we could cover. You can do an entire separate workshop and an entire separate course on interviewing. I'm going to focus on 3 critical concepts that I think will really elevate your ability to interview other people. Number 1, and you may know this intuitively, is you got to ask open-ended questions. It comes back to this. I even see today in my professional capacity, interviewers on TV shows, chat shows, radio news shows, who do a terrible job of this. They do a really bad job of asking open-ended questions. So the differences between a closed-ended question and an open-ended question often comes down to this. Closed-ended questions lead to yes or no answers. So they often are questions like, did that feel, is this correct? Yes or no. Were you aware of that? Yes, I was. No, I wasn't. Do you think? Yeah. Or did you believe? So did, is, where, do. Those kinds of questions are what we call closed-ended questions. Open-ended questions open up the possibility of the responses, right? So instead of saying, did you feel this way? It would be, well, how did you feel about that? You're giving the person a lot more space to use their own descriptions and their own articulation. What were you seeing? Why do you think this happened? Describe what happened next. Tell me more about. These last 2 are the questions I use the most, actually. I want to give the interviewee the ability to tell me what's going on. I don't have to, ask them kind of my opinion on it. I want them just to tell me in their words. And you can just just do that. Oh, can you please describe to me what happened then? Or tell me more about this. I want to know more about that. Much more open-ended. So open-ended questions unlock more surprising, unexpected responses. Closed-ended questions shut down conversation because it often leads to just yes or no responses. Now, this has a role too, because sometimes you need to confirm certain details. Were you born in 1973? Let's say you're interviewing somebody to get their perspective on something, and you want to, their age has something to do with it, right? So sometimes everything has its time and place. But if your goal is to really get a good story together, if it's really to get detail and anecdotes, then when you develop a list of questions to ask somebody, review them to ensure that they're as open-ended as possible, because this will always encourage the most open and interesting answers, right? So once again, how, what, why, describe, tell me more. These sorts of questions are much more productive in terms of being able to get you kind of more unique, I think, honest, authentic answers. Number 2, ask for specific detail, okay? Specific detail is the secret soy sauce to making storytelling come alive. We looked at it at that previous module where I got you to think about things in your 5 senses, right? And we saw like how just sprinkling a little bit of that in, not every detail, but a little bit, will make a huge difference in terms of how engaging and emotionally resonant that writing becomes. We can incorporate that in our interviewing as well. So when you're interviewing somebody else, be sure to include questions that can help them give you that detail, right? So think about asking questions that evoke the 5 senses. Oh, you're talking about your childhood in Guangzhou. What sights and sounds do you most remember from your childhood? Okay, give them that space to be able to fill it with sensory detail. That must have been amazing. Can you describe how you were feeling physically at that time? Right? If someone's telling you a really interesting story about some amazing, thing that they happened or witnessed, and they can tell us all the information. Oh well, I saw, this car, like, jump the on ramp and do that thing. But like, how do they feel physically? They frozen in place and petrified with their heart beating out of their chest. Those are those details that just give life to our work and our storytelling. So if you want specific detail, you should ask more specific questions. Okay. So let's say you're talking to somebody about their childhood. Maybe they mentioned they had a favorite dress growing up. Tell me more about it. All right. Try and find out what color it was. What was the texture? What was the fabric? It's these little details that may seem unnecessary, but that's the kind of human detail that really makes storytelling compelling, right? It's because, again, it's information versus detail. Information is important to get the overview of the story, but the detail is where we connect on a human level, because maybe you remembered something like that in our childhood, in our memories, right? We can relate to it. So, in that spirit, here's one of my favorite tips. Okay, so Rosalie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I have a question for you. What was it like growing up in Anchorage, Alaska?
Oh, growing up in Anchorage, I think as a child felt very um felt very desolate in many
Hmm.
ways.
Okay.
But now I think with more life experience and such, looking back on it, it's a very magical time. I
Yeah.
remember a lot just about being surrounded by nature,
Hmm.
seeing moose in my backyard, in my front yard, eating from our family crabapple tree.
Oh my gosh.
The sense of, the willows falling down around the neighborhood, the fresh air, the clear skies, the aurora
Mhm.
dancing above, even in the city.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Great. So thank you very much for sharing that. I appreciate that, and I think it's really cool that it's like I know someone that grew up in such an interesting place. That's a fair question to ask. All right. According to the rules of interviewing, that's an open-ended question. What was it like growing up in Anchorage, Alaska? Fine. Go ahead and ask that. It's a big question, though. It's a very broad question. And Rosalie, I think is a very gifted communicator. So she was like, giving me some interesting details to work with. But you're talking to someone who maybe hasn't spoken to media or other people about their stories. It's a very big question. I want to share with you one of my favorite tips right now. Okay, so Rosalie, I'm going to ask you another question. Okay,
Go for it.
tell me about this place.
Is that the coastal trail? Tony knows coastal trail. Yes. So this is a trail that it connects a lot of Anchorage, but you can see downtown Anchorage on the back with the few high rises, surrounded by the Chugach Range in the background. I always grew up with mountains are in the east, and downtown has a really, oh no, I won't go off on that tangent actually. I was going to go on a historical tangent on this. But my own personal memories of the Tony Nose Coastal Trails, I used to walk here every week with my mom. And when I come
Hmm.
back and visit, we walk this trail. I used to go running on this along the water. And yeah, it's a really beautiful area that I like
Tell
to
me
come
about
to.
walking with your mom.
So my mom, yeah, she's very fit. She's for her age, she's in her early 60s now, but we still go on hikes and walks together. We used to walk with our dogs growing up. We've always had husky mixes, which is very Alaskan. And one of my I haven't actually walked on this the last couple times that I visited, but the last time I remember going on the coastal trail was with our dog Max, who has since passed away,
Hmm.
and he was getting a bit old at the time. And so, me and my mom would be walking and just, catching up on life. She likes to kind of tell her family stories all the time, every time. It's kind of the same story cycles, which is great because it, makes me remember those places. And I think as I've gotten older, I've gotten more interested in our family history and asking about
Yeah.
those details. But our dog used to walk in our footprints instead of
Oh,
blazing the trail because his paws were getting cold because he was old.
thank you so much. I appreciate that. And look, that was a little technique you can use because you notice how it just took the conversation like a different direction. It unlocked like different memories, right? Triggering from that image. It's a great technique you can use. Use photos, video clips, even listening to snippets of audio or music can have enormous impact on your interviewee's ability to recall memory and will lead to a whole different set of dynamic questions, right? That you can get, just the most interesting insights and details by just kind of showing them their, parts of their life. And then they can kind of recall that as we've been talking about, like the body remembers these experiences, right? So this is a really great tool that you can use if you're able to incorporate this, right? Uh, to me, the most important part of interviewing is actually not even asking the questions. Asking the questions is really important, right? Equally important is actively listening, okay? Because if I have a set of questions in front of me and I'm determined to ask them, I may miss out on the most important insights because I'm not fully paying attention, right? So here's my advice with that. You got to be present. Don't interrupt. Let them, give them space and have them fill it. Don't think ahead to the next question you're just itching to ask because what they might be saying to you right now could be the most important part of this conversation. And if they say something unexpected and interesting, ask a follow-up question because suddenly you're on this exciting new path. So don't be afraid to go onto that path and see where it leads you. You always have your questions. You're there. You've written them down. But what's happening now is a conversation, right? It's taking these things in exciting new directions. So be open to the interview going in a multitude of directions. So my best advice as a journalist with 2 decades of experience interviewing people, write your questions down, be intentional with your questions, make sure they're open-ended, and then in a sense, put them away and have a conversation with somebody, right? Really listen to them, respond to them, pick up interesting things that just, really like raise your storytelling antennae and follow it through. I want to leave you some additional tips in terms of interviewing that I found really useful and important. So with their permission, always with their permission, have an audio recording device running, even your phone. All phones really have note apps now. So you don't miss any of the responses. So you can focus on the conversation and not have to worry that you didn't capture their responses. This is important here. Be prepared to interview someone multiple times. This is especially as people get older and their memories become a bit more fragile and fractured. It's about patience, patient persistence, and also the respect that you have to give to people because they're sharing a really important part of their lives to you, and sometimes maybe hesitantly so. Which is to give them lots of space and grace to do that, right? Often too, as well, like good stories require an investment of time. Like some projects take months, if not years. And part of that is just developing the mutual trust to have someone have a really honest exchange with you and maybe get into some really difficult parts of their life. On that last note, always consider the feelings of your interviewee. I mean, the questions you may be asking them can be, stories and topics of real joy and happiness, but they also may be recalling the most horrible, difficult, day of their life. In cases where someone is opening up about an extremely emotional, difficult experience, they have every right to pause, take a break, or even just discontinue the interview, and we have to respect that. They may also feel uncomfortable after the interview. Maybe they realize, I really shouldn't have said that about this person. Be just mindful and respectful of their right to privacy. Everything's always a conversation about what can be, used, what can be published. The thing that matters the most is you have their informed consent. Okay, so making sure that what you're talking about, they have a clear understanding of, what you're maybe hoping to do with it, what just being really transparent about the whole process. Okay. And sometimes, you may just, again, do these things for like a family archive or a documentary. Just be very upfront about that. And if you ever do use it for something like publication, it's really important that you get in touch and make sure that they're okay with that. Okay, here's our final activity. And this is going to take about 35 minutes. So I want to make sure you have time to do this. It's going to be a fun one. A few things here. For this final activity, I want you to go into a breakout room, or you'll be placed in a breakout room with a workshop partner. So one-to-one. And please remember, you do not have to share anything you're not comfortable with. Again, we respect everyone's privacy and the right to share as much or as little as they wish to. Here's what I want you to do. Just spend 5 minutes each introducing yourselves and explaining the story map moment that you've been developing so far today. Okay, so whatever moment that you've been working on or thinking about, and again, it doesn't have to be at a publishable professional level. We're all just generating ideas here. So you spend 5 minutes each introducing each other and talking about this moment. And then I want you to take 5 minutes to develop a few questions about each other's moment. Okay, so write down maybe just like 3 questions that you want to ask the person about their experience, right? Look for opportunities to help bring out detail and insight. So again, if there's an opportunity to get maybe some more sensory detail from them about that moment, if there's an opportunity to ask an open-ended question that helps, unearth more, perspective or sort of significance as to why this moment really matters to them, please, develop a question around that. And then you just take turns interviewing each other about 10 minutes each. Okay, so I know that this is a few extra steps than before, but this is a really great exercise to hone your conversational skills and also to actively listen. I really encourage you to do all that. So, think of a few questions, but really it's about actively listening and can you take the conversation into an interesting place. I'm going to stop sharing for just a minute. Okay, is there any questions or is there anything that's super unclear before we move into the breakout rooms? I'll put the slide back up so you can consult the steps. No? We just go for it, right? Just go for it. We'll meet someone today, and yeah, we'll just kind of exchange some of our stories.
Okay, so I'll automatically assign everyone into breakout rooms for 10 minutes.
Sorry, the total is going to be, I think, 35. So
okay.
Yeah, they'll spend 5 minutes introducing each other, and then 5 minutes writing the questions, and then the remainder of that time can be the taking turns interviewing each other. Hello, hello, hello. All right. Oh, look at all these wonderful faces. Hey, Susan. Listen, I've got about maybe a few minutes left just to wrap up. I want to keep things on track as much as possible. I know that we're a little bit over, but I've had such a great time today. I wish this could kind of continue, but we'll get our lives to get on. Before I move, just to kind of wrap things up with a few thoughts and some additional resources, would anyone, care to share a little bit about that experience and, what they got out of it? I'm seeing some comments about people just kind of really maybe enjoying the opportunity to connect and to share stories, and maybe that's got you a little bit fired up. Anyone at all? Yeah, Sulin?
I'll just say congratulations to Peggy. She did not ask a single closed-end question.
Yes, love it. I love it. Also, as an Asian, I love metrics to measure things by, so that's fantastic. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Any kind of fresh insights you kind of picked up? Oftentimes I feel like the act of, having someone ask you about your life reveals sorts of interesting things that you haven't even thought about. Oh, yeah, Sulin again.
Okay, sorry, just if no one else has their hand up, not on anything specific, but I was shocked at how fast the time went.
Yeah.
Because of the interviewing and all the additional detail that comes up from good interviewing. So when you first said this was going to be half an hour, I just couldn't believe how we'd fill it in, and yet we ran out of time.
You ran out of time. Well, you know what? If you're into it, if you're comfortable with it, exchange contact information. You've got like a new, colleague, writing partner, someone who can kind of like, help inspire you and keep you, keep you motivated and going. That's fantastic. Listen, I really appreciate all that time you spent together, and for being vulnerable and sharing things about yourself, and also I think giving people the space and the grace as well to share their stories. I'm just going to quickly finish up my portion of the presentation, and then I can happily stick around for a few minutes in case people have any specific questions they'd like to ask me. But once again, it's been a real honor to do this. Where do we go from here? Okay, so my hope is that now you have a starting point, or maybe even a few, for a personal story that you would love to tell, develop it out. And you've got some more techniques now on how to bring out that maximum level of detail to help with that emotional resonance. So the process continues. The next step would be to continue to refine and focus this idea so it has more shape, more clarity of purpose. So the questions that I would consider at this point would be, what type of story is this shaping up to be? Again, you can change your mind, and people often do as they continue to do research and get into the process, and maybe they kind of pivot on the idea. But at this point in time, is this maybe more of a personal essay? Is this actually maybe more of a video documentary because you would have access to some really good visuals? The choice is really yours, but these are the questions I would start considering. What additional work do I need to do? So you've got your personal perspective, you're going to continue to flesh that out, but are there other points of view that you really need to get to help tell the story in a complete way? So that's going to involve doing interviews. Maybe, again, if you want to do an audio or video documentary, you're going to have to get assets for it. So whether it's sound or video or photos, there's that piece of it as well. And then this bit of reflection right here, which is ultimately, what am I hoping to say with this work? What am I really trying to get across as a message? And again, it doesn't have to be any sort of particularly preachy kind of message or with any kind of real thesis to it, but what are you hoping to say? How are you hoping to connect to people? You might not even know this until the very end of the process, but it's something to kind of consider. What are you trying to tell your audience with this? In order to help with this, I've created a story planning template that I'm going to send you the link. I can put it into chat in a moment, but I just want to go through it really quickly. It's a Google Doc. Basically, this allows you to create like a focus statement to help organize and shape your story idea into a more cohesive project. So it's very straightforward, but you just kind of fill things out as much as you can, and you can continue coming back to it and refining it. So even starting with a working title, anything will do for now. But questions you want to consider for the story is your target audience. So who is the story really for? Again, if you're interested in someday publishing it, maybe to a news site or even as a book, that's going to have a kind of primary audience in mind. Even if it's just your own family, you can just put that down for now, right? Things may change, but you got to know who you're kind of writing this for, even if it's just for yourself, but there's probably people then like you who would be interested in it. The next question is, what's the media format? So what form is your story maybe going to take? So again, I've listed out some options, but again, like storytelling is such a hybrid endeavor that you will have elements of multiple kinds of storytelling in yours, but primarily, is it mostly text? Is it going to be a photo essay? Is it going to be a collection of audio? Whatever you're kind of thinking in this moment. Number 4, key story elements. So this kind of comes back to some of our previous exercises involving thinking sensory detail and memory recall. But what are the main parts or moments of your story? So what are the kind of defining moments? And you don't have to have them all figured out, but is there a beginning, a middle, and an end? And sometimes that end is the part that we're getting towards. So it's okay if you don't have it immediately. It just means that you're on a journey or a quest to figure something out, and that's going to be the ending. So yeah, making notes as you go is just a really important part of developing and seeing the vision of this thing come together. Then you got to consider your interviews and other sources. So Who else will you talk to? What other sources will you include? Are there any people, experts, or archival materials you want to feature because it'll help tell the complete story? This question, potential challenges or obstacles, is really important because if there are sort of language obstacles, if there are travel difficulties, these are just things that you can make note of to help. If you really are passionate about getting this out there, it'll help you kind of get your plan going and see it to fruition. And finally, this to me is kind of the important bit, which is the focus statement. So what is that main idea or message of your story? It's just a description, a very brief one, a few sentences at the most that just capture the core of your story. So why are you telling this story? What are we going to see in it? Just as like a really brief fictional example, in this video documentary, I'll tell the story of visiting my grandmother in China to learn more about traditional Chinese calligraphy. This was something I rejected as a child, but now as an adult, I'm yearning to reconnect with my cultural heritage. That's enough, right? That's just a bit of a focus statement that gives you the kind of significance of the story and why it matters to you, help keep you on track, right? As you're incorporating other ideas and other information. Okay, we got to the very end. I mentioned earlier, I teased that I have a personal connection to the Chinese Canadian Museum that goes beyond just kind of visiting it. And I'll tell you about it right now. So on July 1st, this is a photo from the grand opening of the CCM on July 1st in their permanent home in the Wing Sang building, the historic Wing Sang building. You see a lot of really prominent people there in the Chinese Canadian community across Canada coming to open up what is a really, I mean this from the bottom of my heart, like a really important institution that I feel a lot of gratitude towards. So here's the personal connection. So the Honorable Mary Ng, who is a federal minister, gave a speech at the opening of this museum. And she had this wonderful speech talking about the importance of this museum. And then she ended off with this. I thought I would end with this quote because I was trying to find something that would capture my own personal feelings. And here it is. To my parents, for giving the two greatest gifts that I've ever received, Chinese blood and a Canadian heart. Thanks, A. So the really cool part about this is that I wrote those words. This is the dedication in my book that I made to my parents. The other amazing thing about this was that I watched this happen on a live stream with my parents at their home. It was a moment that I would put in my story map as being a defining moment because it was me understanding that your words can travel to amazing places and that within one generation of my parents moving here, their son was able to tell a story that resonated with someone from another part of this country and is now forever a part of the opening of this museum that includes all of us. So I'm part of this amazing legacy. And I will never, ever not be grateful for that opportunity and to not feel inspiration from the idea that anything, like I have a voice. And here's the thing, so do you. You have a voice. You have the ability to tell a story and who knows how many people you could touch and connect with that. And this is just my personal example of discovering that, something I wrote 10 years ago is connected to this thing that I'm doing right now. So thank you to the CCM for this amazing opportunity. Thank you for your time, for sharing your day with me and your experiences. Listen, get in touch if you'd like. You can hit me up at adrian.ma@torontomu.ca. I would be honored and excited to help you develop your personal stories, whatever ideas you have. You can fill out that template and I can absolutely kind of help you with that. So let me just see right here. Any questions before we start to wrap up here? Yeah, Cassandra?
Could you please post the link in chat? I didn't get it written down from the screen.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I'll do that right now. To the document or to the whole presentation? I could do both.
I was thinking of this document.
Yeah, okay.
But both, that's great.
All right, here it goes. And you will put up all the materials as well. I've got some worksheets that are based on today's presentation that will be made available online as well. But remember, right? You can contact me anytime. Happy to stick around for some questions. Jen would like to ask, if you want to work towards publishing, what is that journey like and what are some good resources? So that's a great question. I would say that if you are interested in publishing, my very first suggestion is always identify the publications you're most interested in working with. Every publication has their own sort of editorial process. And so the best thing to do is kind of figure out what kind of aligns the most with the piece that you want to do. And then kind of go approach that masthead and see if you can connect with an editor there. You can, pitch them the story, or get more information about what they're looking for in terms of open calls. But narrowing it down, first of all, is really important. So, again, think about the medium. If it's like a radio piece, then you might want to take that to your local CBC, radio station. But that's going to be a very different thing if you pitch to like Maclean's or to Chatelaine or something like that, right? Peggy, thank you so much. No, I appreciate you being here today. I appreciate all of you and all your time. I'm happy to stick around for any questions. But again, you got my email now, so feel free to connect with me at any point. I'd love an opportunity to come back to the CCM in person and do something like this again. But yeah, this is great. This is just another step in all your amazing journeys. And I'm really excited possibly, reading or seeing or listening to something that you come up with. And if I had even a small hand in making that happen, I'm going to be the happiest guy in the world, right? So thank you.
Thank you so much, Adrian, for this amazing workshop. This has been in the works, like in the planning for like 5 months or something now. Like I think we first started having our conversations about having this in June, and so it's so nice to have had this finally happen. Fulfilled every expectation. I think I can say that on behalf of everyone in the room. And I just want to plug a few things at the end here. So I just want to remind everyone that this recorded workshop will be available online on our website. I dropped the link to the webpage in the chat box. So that will be on the CCM website, this recording with any, those long gaps when everyone's like doing their personal work, that will be cut out. And the slides and some of the workshops Adrian has created. There was a question about publishing stories. So I just want to tease a future program that will be happening probably in the spring. We're still trying to nail down a date for it, but that will be run by Catherine Clement, who is the curator of the Paper Trail exhibition, our inaugural feature exhibition at the Chinese Canadian Museum. And we'll be talking about some of the ways to publish personal stories, whether that's in traditional print format, through electronic sources, or, like doing blog posts, photo essays, things like that. So that's something to look forward to. And yeah, please join us for our future programs. You can always take a look at our website, follow our social media at CC Museum BC. And thank you so much for joining, and I hope you have an amazing rest of your day and weekend.
多謝晒你，謝謝。